So today we will get started with a land acknowledgement, and then we will move into our presentation. So let's begin by respectfully acknowledging we are zooming in from the region of Muskoka, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people. Gravenhurst Against Poverty is committed to not just acknowledging this, but to also learn and educate ourselves to create opportunity and honor sacred places, and to take action towards our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for the future generations. Today, we have the honor of hosting another series, another presentation, a part of the Building Community Compassion series. Today, we will be talking more in depth about mental health and busting the stigma of mental health. And in the past, we have talked about poverty, we have talked about addiction, and in our future, we will be talking about maternal health and after baby care, and we will be talking about autonomy in mental health and addiction services. It is with great honor that I am able to help support this series, and we hope to grow it into the months of March, April, and May, so you will see more in the programs coming ahead. You will see that we are expanding it, and we are hoping to add in more diversity in the presentations with more community members that are not only healthcare professionals or professionals in our community, but also citizens of our community. Today, we're going to welcome Noelle Rebelein from the Canadian Mental Health Association, and Noelle is going to join us and begin her presentation on the myths and busting the stigma. So Noelle, would you like to come on?
Hi everybody. I can't start video.
Oh, there you go, Noelle. You're a host now. Just took a minute.
Thank you. Thanks, Des.
Yes, you're welcome. So this is Noelle, and so thank you for joining us, Noelle. It's with great honor that we get to have you here and be able to hear all you have to say.
Thanks, Des. Okay. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. Bridging the Gap by Busting Stigma. First, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Noelle Rebelein. I'm a social worker. I'm the area manager for Muskoka, CMHA, Muskoka, Parry Sound. My real passion these last few years has been mental health in the workplace and supporting psychological health and safety in the workplace. So I've done a lot of training and presenting on that. Some of the work that I've done and some of the things I've learned are sort of sprinkled into this presentation, but it's not really about that. So just to share a little bit about myself. The purpose of this presentation is to talk about stigma because it is so dangerous. And the goal of this information is to provide some stigma busting information. So through looking at mental health on a spectrum and understanding that it's not an us-them situation, we're all on a spectrum, impact of poverty on health and mental health, and some protective factors and what it means to be in recovery. I think if you have questions, I won't necessarily see them, but Des is going to alert me somehow if there are questions. So feel free to ask and I will do my best or get you an answer afterward.
Yes, I will be, you will see at the bottom of your screen there's a Q&A. So those are for direct questions you would like to ask Noelle and have them presented during this recording. And the chat is there as well if you want to talk to other participants or ask questions off screen, and we will make sure they all get answered either now or after the presentation by Noelle.
Thanks, Des. So what is stigma? In terms of mental health and mental illness, stigma in this situation refers to the negative attitudes or prejudice and negative behaviors or discrimination toward people with substance use and mental health problems, mental illnesses. So having fixed ideas or judgments, such as thinking that people with these issues are not normal or not like us, that they cause their own problems, or that they can simply get over their problems if they want to, which is false. It can also mean fearing and avoiding what we don't understand. So that could mean the impact of that is excluding people from regular parts of life. For instance, having a job, like hiring someone, or supporting them in keeping their job if they have a mental health issue, or access to a safe place to live. The title's not showing up on that for some reason, but basically, sorry?
Noelle, you may have to minimize and then do it again
Okay.
to have it size. I was also just going to mention to those participants who are here, you may want to check your screen to see if your mute is on, and if it is on, you may want to mute yourself for the time being unless you have a question.
The title of the slide isn't showing up, but that's okay. How does stigma affect those seeking help? So in a big way, it tends to be about 5 years before someone seeks help after first noticing signs of mental illness, which is 5 years of suffering needlessly, and potentially things getting worse needlessly as well. So prejudice and discrimination exclude people with mental health and substance use problems from activities that are open to other people. So this can cause people to believe the negative things that other people in the media say about them and about mental illness, and have lower self-esteem because they feel guilt and shame. Prejudice and discrimination contribute to people keeping their problems a secret. So as a result, they avoid getting the help they need, and their mental health or substance use problems are less likely to decrease and go away. Oh, I just had to hit it twice. There, okay. So what is mental health? Mental health is a state of being or well-being in which an individual can realize their abilities, cope with normal stresses of life, bounce back from stresses, and work productively and fruitfully in their community and their families, and having the capacity to feel, think, and act in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy life. And mental health respects culture, equity, social justice, interconnections, and personal dignity. In some of the work we do, we look at mental health on a spectrum, and we are all on the spectrum. And throughout the day, we might be on different places in the spectrum. So if we think of that mental health, that definition we just saw as sort of the green zone, we're imbalanced, we might use words like productive, coping, satisfied, content. And then if we look at moving toward the deactivation end of things, that might be more of a lower mood, a tired, low energy, even depression. And then further into the crisis end of that would be maybe thoughts of suicide, in an inability to function in normal life or in day-to-day life. On the other side of that spectrum, we have activation. So that may mean having more energy, or feeling like electrified a little bit, or buzzing. Going closer to crisis, we might be feeling anxious, or really having anxiety, stressed. And then the crisis end might be a panic attack, or it might be something like a manic episode for someone with bipolar disorder. So it's normal for us to sort of cycle back green to yellow. Even within a day, we might feel stressed, and then we might come back to balance. The issues arise when people go to one end or the other, and they get stuck there, or sometimes get stuck in loops. That it's hard to get back to a balanced state of being. So getting stuck, This is where we would see possibly a mental health diagnosis of depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. So when we're getting stuck at one end of the spectrum and we're not getting back to balanced for a period of time, probably days or weeks at a time, we might see changes in mood, behavior, and thinking. It might be triggered by something. It might be something external to us. It might be something biological. It might be the result of unhelpful coping patterns. And it tends to be associated with significant distress, impaired functioning, and other health problems. And this is where we would want someone to come in and get support. And there are different contributing factors, including biological, psychological, and social. So there are also lots of protective factors that people have in terms of maintaining balance in our lives. Biophysical could be a family history, genetics and secure attachment as a child. Psychological protective factors include really good coping skills that we've learned over the years or that we've worked on, and optimistic outlook and personality. Social factors include economic security, good connectedness with others, with family and with friends, coworkers. Spiritual protective factors are things like having a future orientation, so really being oriented to the future, setting goals, achieving goals, and having a set of moral beliefs that guide us in our decision making. And systemic protective factors include things like adequate formal and informal supports, access to safe, reliable housing, access to nutritious food, those sorts of things. I put this slide in because I really like it. If you know a child who attends a Trillium Lakelands District School Board school, you've probably seen this. It's in all their things that they put out, their agendas and things. Feed All For, and it's teaching kids from an early age to look at not just their mind at school, but also their body, their spirit, their emotions. And I really appreciate this, and I appreciate kids being taught that it's all important and on a daily basis to be taking care of these things to help us stay balanced from a young age. I do want to say here too that unfortunately I had two former clients of our agency lined up to speak to you today about their own recoveries and about the way stigma affected their recovery. But neither of them could make it, unfortunately. So it was going to be a better presentation, but hopefully this is a good starting point for you. So if we're going to focus on just in terms of protective factors, that last one, the social protective factors, and look at the social and system aspects for a minute. The social determinants of health are the economic and social conditions that influence individual and group differences in health status. So they're the health promoting factors found in one's living and working conditions, such as the distribution of income, wealth, influence, and power, rather than the individual risk factors, such as behavioral risk factors or genetics. And these are things that influence the risk for disease or vulnerability to disease or injury. So the distributions of social determinants are often shaped by public policy. It's really important for us to remember that chronic stress is significantly related and correlated to living in poverty. I know you guys have talked about this a bit already. I just think it's really important to remember because of I hope it reinforces the work that GAP does and the importance of that work. Things like living conditions, living with a lot of noise or not having a lot of privacy, maybe living conditions are crowded or there's thin walls. There might be poor physical safety in some living conditions, some neighborhoods, that sort of thing. Being faced with discrimination on a daily basis can certainly affect chronic stress levels. Access to basic needs, if you're worrying about where your next meal is coming from, if you're going to be able to pay the rent, obviously that is hugely stressful for people. And there's increased barriers. This is sort of an invisible thing. There's increased barriers to supports. We've seen in COVID a great shift to virtual care, but some people don't have good internet. They might not even have a phone. They might not have minutes on their phone. Their work schedule might be prohibitive in terms of getting an appointment at a 9-to-5 agency. They might not have childcare. Transportation, we know that a lot of services are sort of in Bracebridge and that Gravenhurst, it's really tough for people to get seen in Gravenhurst. So these are things that people without a car, without transportation, it's really stressful just to get to that appointment. So chronic stress, just focusing on that, we've related it to poverty, but for everybody, chronic stress has huge impacts on us, and this is scary. And I don't like thinking about this too much because I've had stress, and it is a scary thing. But it reinforces the need for self-care and to really get help and seek help and support others in seeking help. So when chronic stress is experienced, the body makes more cortisol than it has a chance to release. And so if we're stressed for a short period of time, we have that cortisol boost. It helps us, get to safety, solve a problem, and then we do something physical and it leaves our body. But when the stresses are chronic, then that cortisol is constantly pumping. And then high levels of cortisol can wear down the brain's ability to function properly. So this impairs brain function in multiple ways. It can disrupt synapse regulation, resulting in the loss of sociability and the avoidance of interactions with others. So you literally isolate yourself in terms of what's going on in your brain. And then stress can actually kill brain cells and even reduce the size of the brain. And that can create risk factors for future diseases like Alzheimer's, things like that. Chronic stress has a shrinking effect on the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for memory and learning. So if there are kids in high school that are maybe experiencing chronic stress, then they're not going to be scoring as well on tests. They're not going to be remembering things, and it makes sense if they're focusing on survival. In terms of effects on the body, chronic stress can lead to significant problems such as increased risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Other systems of the body stop working too, including the digestive, excretory, and reproductive structures, which is really scary and things that we want to protect, of course. So chronic stress can impair the body's immune system and exacerbate any already existing illnesses. So obviously these days we're faced with a lot of chronic stress because of a global pandemic, but we're also needing to really protect ourselves from infection and hoping that we have the strength to fight off viruses and that sort of thing. There are also intergenerational effects of stress where changes in the brain, they've showed studies, changes in the brain can be passed down from mother to child. There's a really great video about the effect of chronic stress on the brain, and I put it in the resources at the end. It's if you in YouTube say chronic stress in the brain, how chronic stress affects your brain. It's really great and digestible ways. It's also a scary watch and motivating for self-care and to care for others. So switching gears back to the individual, there is help. So when we're stuck, when we're experiencing symptoms of mental illness, there are things that are help. No treatment is 100% effective usually, and it can be a long journey to find what actually helps and works to manage mental illness. But we're a solution-focused agency. We firmly believe recovery is possible, and we firmly believe that there are ways to help and maintain wellness, even with a mental illness. So some of the treatments that we have available to us are medication, psychotherapy, peer support, and mindfulness. So all very well studied and effective treatments. And then we can do better as a society to reduce poverty, oppression, and discrimination. And by reducing stigma, people will reach out for help much sooner. And that's important. I want to talk about recovery now. Recovery is a personal process that people with mental illness go through in gaining control, meaning, and purpose in their lives. So recovery involves different things for different people. For some, recovery means complete absence of symptoms of mental illness, and for others, recovery means living a full life in the community while learning to live with ongoing symptoms. So, of course, someone with a diagnosis such as depression, anxiety, they can work hard, they can, access those treatments we've talked about, and they can actually go into recovery where they're not feeling the effects of those diagnoses anymore. And part of that recovery may be keeping up with a wellness plan that they've developed for staying well. For someone who has a diagnosis such as schizophrenia, it may be that there are always some symptoms present. There might be some delusional thinking or some external hallucinations, or seeing things or hearing things that other people don't see or hear. But it's learning to live with that and learning to work on gaining insight into what triggers may affect wellness. So recovery involves changes in the way individuals with mental health think, act, and feel about themselves and the possibilities in their lives. It also requires changes in the way services are funded and organized, mental health professionals are trained, and success is measured. So recovery is about transforming the mental health system so that it truly puts the person at the center. And that is always our goal. So I really was hoping that there would be a couple people here to share their stories of recovery with you, and maybe they would come back another time and speak with you about what they've gone through and the bumps in the road. I had some really good chats with them, so I'm really sorry that this group isn't getting a chance to hear those stories. But in conclusion, how do we bust stigma? So this is a big thing. We talk about mental health and we talk about mental illness. There are initiatives like the Bell Let's Talk. CMHA has a Ride, Don't Hide event that was, of course, canceled this past summer. But I'm hoping that in years to come that it will get going again. It's really important. Part of my work with Mental Health Works and the psychological health and safety and the workplace initiatives that I do are encouraging coworkers to reach out to each other if they're noticing signs that someone is struggling. Just being the kind of workplace and the kind of family and the kind of community that reaches out to each other and checks in. Talks about our own experiences with mental illness and with getting treatment and with recovery. That's how we bust stigma. Also, we understand that mental health is on a spectrum and we all have vulnerabilities and protective factors. And of course we have, and that's unique for everyone. We each have unique triggers and we have unique strengths and coping strategies that we've developed within ourselves that we nurture and help us maintain good mental health. We normalize self-care. We normalize taking a mental health day. We normalize boundaries, saying no, prioritizing our own self-care and our own wellness. We care for others who are less privileged and less advantaged than ourselves. So we understand that we have a job, like for myself, I have a job that supports me in maintaining my mental health and really good benefits and that sorts of things. I know that others are less fortunate, of course, and less advantaged in terms of discrimination. And so it's our role to do what we can to lift people up. And that is part of what GAP does, I know. We normalize seeking help. We talk about our own experiences seeking help. We remind each other of the help that's available. We help each other get to that appointment if we need to. We tell people that there are treatments and that recovery is possible. So if people feel hopeless about, thinking that there is any help for them, then they're going obviously to be less likely to seek out that treatment and to seek out support. But by sharing that we really believe recovery is possible, whatever that looks like on an individual level, then we're going to be more likely to reach out. Here are some of the resources. That last How Chronic Stress Affects Your Brain is a video that I really encourage people to watch. It's not all doom and gloom. There are definitely some tangible ideas there. And then Mental Health Works is the website that talks about the workshops I do with workplaces in terms of supporting each other and looking at mental health in the workplace and things like accommodation and protecting psychological health and safety. And that is the end.
Thank you so much, Noelle, for sharing the information and the contact information or the resource information. For those participating who may be interested in some of these sites, please know that this recording will go up on GAP website and will be available to you.
You can also reach out to me and I'm happy to share anything. I'll just put my I'll put my stuff back up. There we go. Are there any questions?
If anyone would like to ask questions, I do know that you may be unable to unmute yourself, so you can always ask in the Q&A section or in the chat, and I can read them out. I will leave out your name for confidentiality, but at this time, Noelle, do you want to pass over host back to me?
Sure can.
Thank you so much, Noelle, for being here, being willing to share. We look forward to inviting you back for maybe a point 2, mental health stigma busting 2.0, and having some more community members share their story within the Gravenhurst community and their story to recovery and to continued care.
Thanks, Des.
Thanks. So for those that are still with us, we're grateful that you have tuned into the 3rd edition of the Building Compassion series, and we look forward to having you. Our next one is not until January, and you will see in our flyers and on our website and Facebook links and all the social media that you will be able to see when our next sessions are and who's presenting them. The next one will be Laura Barber from the Canadian Mental Health Association, and the one following will be Desiree Reisenberg from the Canadian Mental Health Association. So thank you, everyone. It's a short presentation today, but packed full of information. And so if you have any questions, this is your time to ask. Otherwise, we will end today's series. Yeah, I see people talking about hosting a panel discussion. And so that is the hope, to have all of our presenters together at the end of the series, possibly in March or April, and hosting a panel discussion with everyone. We are very hopeful that that panel discussion will happen in person. Noelle, there's some comments around stigma in the workplace and having further discussion about that. Okay, well, it looks like there are no more questions for Noelle at this time. Please know that you can contact Gravenhurst Against Poverty if you have any questions about the content today, if you have any interest in being one of our presenters in the future, and we would love to hear from you. You can also contact Noelle directly. Her information will be a part of the recording that will go on to our Facebook and our website at Gravenhurst Against Poverty. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great afternoon.